We'll get there. Hi, Billy.
Hello.
Thanks for coming to last night's meeting too. Appreciated you and Roger's presence there. We got a lot of work to do.
Yeah, my pleasure for being here.
And then you go and run for mayor. Because you're not doing it.
Really throw a wrench and think, well, I won't be on these subcommittees anymore. I can say that much.
You're moving away from us if you get the mayorship, huh?
Well, yeah, if I win, yeah, that's all I'll be doing. Except walking my daughter to preschool right now, who is crying. So that will still happen whether I'm there or not.
Yeah, so we'll make use of you while we have you. Hi, Erica. Are you in England?
I am. I'm pretty out of it. We got here just about 24 hours ago. So, but it's sunny. It does. The sun does shine in England.
It is sunny. I was at a BOT meeting. I got home at midnight. So I feel you. Macy, who opened this meeting, she clerked that BOT meeting. So yeah, none of us get sleep after meetings because you can't stop your brain from spinning around. So I think we're all moving at a slower pace today. I'm trying to pick it up.
But at least you don't have jury duty.
I know. You know what's ironic about it is that I was watching a Netflix special like a month back, and it was this kind of crazy lurid one where a guy's wife, both of his wives had died in a similar way, and so they were doing this whole research, and it was the whole back the jury, and I was like, that's really interesting. I never really been called up for jury duty. I wonder what that would be like. I didn't say it out loud, but people listening Google, and suddenly I get a jury duty notification like later, and I was like, I didn't even articulate it in my brain. Like, how did you know? So yeah, it was nice. The system is really strange. I haven't been called for jury duty before, so to think that you cannot know what your day is going to look like until 5 o'clock the day prior, and then they indicate that for you is a little mind blowing to think, like, when we all have busy schedules, how you're going to wrap your brain around like, okay, I can't do that. So I'm glad that it worked out and they had canceled all the jury duty for that day or whatever it was. So my term is complete. So we've got most everybody, I think, except for Whitney. And I don't know that Miranda is going to join us this morning. She may or may not. So we can probably get started. I'm going to resend to Whitney just to make sure, because sometimes she's had issues receiving stuff. So give me just a second and I'll resend that to her. And we can get started. Where did that go? Okay. All right. So I missed the last meeting on the 8th, and my apologies. You guys had talked about lot coverage, and I only had one addition to that about vegetation cover underneath. And I just wanted to check and see what the group thinks about that. If you guys think that that has some relevance, then I am willing to move on with that topic.
Yeah, I think it's
Suggestion
I think it's a really good clarifier, because the reality is if they put a bunch of slabs underneath, then I do think it needs to count towards lot coverage. Oh, that's all right. I think that's a good clarification because if like I said, if they put cement slabs down, then it becomes lot coverage in my mind. And if if there's plants growing underneath, it's hard, then clearly the water can percolate and permeate downward. The one thing I'd ask for from you guys, I think we were all in agreement that, shouldn't count towards lot coverage. Though again, unless it was on a concrete slab. But assuming it's not on a concrete slab, I just want some more general points that I can use if there's a pushback on this. Sorry, my daughter's totally crying as we're walking to preschool. But if you guys can give me more, just good points of logic I can use, because I do know there's at least one person who's going to push against this pretty hard on the planning commission. So I just want to have a lot of good logic to come back and basically sway the rest of the group about why this should not count towards lot coverage. So just any, in general, kind of like the ease
I
of
agree.
a house.
And my thought is this, Billy. So if an array has a pole, it's on a pole, and that, footers put into the ground, and something you would do like with a sign, for example, like if you had a sign, we're not counting signs toward lot coverage. So if it has a post in the ground, there's dirt or vegetative cover underneath, then ostensibly water is running off the sign, and we've never thought about it for lot coverage unless they're putting a concrete pad there and making it into, hey, there's a footprint of this thing. And so that would be my suggestion on that, because I know what you're talking about at the Planning Commission, and there was some pushback about that, thinking that it would constitute impervious surface. So I would say, absolutely, if you put a concrete pad there and you cover that by our definition, how we define impervious surface of structures, concrete or asphalt, then I would say absolutely yes. But if you're putting a footer into the ground to hold the pole, and all around it is pervious surface, dirt, maybe you're growing things or grass, then, I think that hopefully can give us the leverage that we're looking for with this, but explicitly note that piece about vegetative cover underneath, minus any little footer, for a pole.
Yeah.
What does everyone else think?
That's good logic. Yeah, anyone else?
I would agree with everything Cynthia just said. It seems kind of obvious to me that pervious versus impervious surface is kind of the decider, sounds like. And unless there's another issue, I just don't see why this should be problematic.
Cool. Thank you. I agree. Anyone else?
It may come up with setbacks, but we'll get into that. But I think that, yeah. Melody, Erica, any thoughts on that?
I got nothing to add. I totally agree. I don't know if it's helpful, Billy, to also just mention some of the research that's coming out of Jack's Solar Garden and other places that are growing under these solar panels, that when you have vegetation as opposed to a hard surface, that it can actually help cool down the solar panels. It can help with, all sorts of things. So yeah, I agree.
I don't have anything specific to add to that. I would agree with the Jack Solar Garden and the agrivoltaics research.
Awesome.
I'm sorry, what did you call that? Jack's Garden? Or what's that called? Just so I can reference that.
Jack's Garden, and it's called agrovoltaics.
Agrovoltaics.
One word, agrovoltaics.
Okay, and I'll just use that term.
And Jack's Solar Garden is a tour that that Erica has promoted and put out an invite for. That's July 8th. Am I correct, Erica?
That is true. Billy, if you can come, it would be great. They are sponsoring us for the tour. Usually it costs, I don't know, about $20 with the Eventbrite fee. But they're gonna do it for us for free as a government organization. So if you can make it July 8th at 1:30, and I think Byron's gonna probably do our tour for us, and he's the one that really developed it. It's actually his father's land, originally his grandfather's land. So it'll be a neat story, and then just a neat example of what can happen pairing agriculture. And for them, it's a lot of research as well. There's a lot of pollinator research and agriculture or agrivoltaic research, and really like kind of how successful is it with a number of different research institutions. So if you're interested, I'm happy to forward that to you. And if you know others that would like to go, that would be great.
Got slots, right? We've got slots
Yes.
open for them.
Yep.
Sounds good. Where is that gonna be? Where is that gonna be?
Down in Boulder. I'm not sure exactly where that is.
Yeah, I think it's off 75th, Billy. It's down in, I think, the Gun Barrel area, but I can send you the info.
That would be great. I think I can pull that off on a Friday, so that would be great. If you send me that, that sounds good.
Great. Okay.
Okay. So we had talked lot coverage. We were talking about height. Backing up just a little bit, I had sent, when I sent the agenda yesterday, that a lot of the common heights I'm seeing for ground mounts are between 15 and 20 feet. That was a fair standard that I was seeing on size. I think that's where, Whitney would be super helpful, because she could guide us if that seems reasonable, especially because a lot of what Safe Built is saying is, or excuse me, Soul Smart is saying is to go with the, to go with accessory setbacks and not the larger setbacks. So as you can see on our screen here, only two districts, the mountain residential, generally acre size, the low density residential, generally 16,000 square feet, those have a higher allowance for accessory structure height. But then all these other districts, commercial and residential, are all max 20 feet. So that's saying a shed, a garage, anything like that. It's noting that these are smaller districts, so the smaller height. So it's not like if there was a maximum set for a ground mount, that it would necessarily be an issue, because we could work with 20 feet, even if we set a baseline feet that, for accessory structures, or we could just let what the accessory height in the district allow it. But where that comes into play when you think about it is how the height and where that's going to be located on the property. So with respect to setbacks, so there may be pushback from neighbors if they're like, hey, you're putting this 25-foot thing right close to, 5 feet from or 10, 15 feet from my property and not closer to you. Maybe it won't even be an issue, but just something to kind of consider in tandem. And then mostly what I saw from the research was 5 foot over the top of, for rooftop solar. That was kind of the main common denominator that I was seeing, was a 5 foot height exception for solar. And I don't know if we want to get into, do we make special regulations if you're at or near your height now? Should that just be allowed? One particular case I'm thinking of is the planned unit development that went down by the Knotted Root Brewery. They are building 2 duplexes, and they were they were held to a maximum height, which I had not seen this done in this town because the maximum height as shown here is 35 feet for all districts. But because they were asking permission for something and going into an area where most of the structures are a story or a story and a half, they were held to around 24 feet. So yeah, their building is not above 25 feet. And when I drive by, I look at it and, you know, and I remember when they made that requirement thinking, wow, that's pretty, that's a lot. I mean, they really restricted them. But when you look at it down there and you pass those buildings, you're like, wow, those are really, really tall. And so it's coming to my mind of, given how much the neighborhood fought that development and height was such a huge concern, I'm wondering how they would feel if they put solar on their roof. And
But they have
even
pitched,
though
they have pitched
above-
roofs in this, so it probably wouldn't be a problem.
it's true.
I mean,
That's
I
true.
think pitched roofs really kind of take care of that almost every time,
Okay.
because there should be a 3 foot. I think when I was reading something through the solar here over the last couple of weeks, there should even be a 3 foot setback, you know, along the roof line, so that for fire.
For fire.
So I
Yes.
mean, already just with a pitched roof, the way up, you know, solar array would be put in there, and you know, the limitations on it because of fire code. I don't think it would come any higher than the 20 than where it's at now.
Okay. Okay. Because it really, what I saw was, in order to have airflow underneath the panels, 3 inches is kind of a standard, but they look at more like 4 to 6 inches off of the roof itself in order to get that airflow underneath the panels.
Sure.
But I know that that's going to cause an issue being on a slope. They just were a case where it's like, you know, trying to think of what you and I were talking about previously, Billy, about maximum height, and trying to think, you know, if you're at your max height and you want to push over, how that would be. And I think you're right. In this case, it really wouldn't make a difference. But just thinking of like a blanket 5-foot allowance in some cases, you know, that could make a difference.
Well, we did ended up. You weren't here the last meeting, so I'm forgetting. We did ended up, and even I ended up kind of agreeing to that 5 foot, even for
Okay.
buildings that are at 35 feet, or, you know, even for buildings that are, can't remember. I feel like maybe we said for buildings that are existing and over 35 feet that they might have to get a variance if they needed to actually go 5 feet higher than, say a building's 38 feet high. Like, if they could pull it off and stay at 40 feet, you know, at the 35 plus 5, then they're good to go. But if they needed to go to 41, 42, or 43, we thought the variance process would be reasonable for them to have to go through. If I'm remembering this correctly, remind me if I'm not. Everyone who was there last 2 weeks ago, but I think ultimately we did come to the agreement, and even I did, because Whitney had some good points, that for new and existing structures, for new ones too, that if they built the building to 35 feet or whatever, or in the case of, you know, the little bear there, you know, 24 feet, that they could go 5 feet higher. And the logic that swayed me, the logic that I would like to use to, you know, with the PC and the BZA, is that we don't want someone to end up deciding, well, screw it, I'm going to build a 35-foot building and not put in solar. And that was, you know, to us, that was,
We want to promote solar.
yeah, we want the
Yes.
solar to go down, you know, or go up. We want the solar to happen.
So help me understand, because I was gone. When we look at this 5-foot height exceedance, are we saying, okay, max height is 35 feet, so maximum you could go is 40. Otherwise, you need to go to the Board of Zoning adjustment for a variance. And we're not looking at what is your individual height that you are right now. We're just looking at it as a flat, potentially 40 would be the max with solar, and anything above that would be by variance.
Yeah,
Which of course would be.
yeah, I think how we worded it was from the roof deck, so that way if there's a flat roof and the parapets, you know, that they would, you know, they would really come from the roof deck up, so potentially that would knock off some of that 5 feet, but what we said was, yeah, in the case of really an existing building that's above 35 feet already, if they really needed 5 more feet, but the 5 feet would bring them above 40, then they would need to go for a variance. Really, for a new building, it should never need to go above 40. They're held to 35
Right.
feet. Then they get 5 more above the roof deck. If it's a 35-foot flat
Okay.
roof building and there is no parapet, then they get to go to 40 feet without a variance. And, I know initially we said that's really going against the concept of zoning and codes, but like, I think that logic that, we don't want people just to say, well, I'm not going to put in solar then. I'm just going to build a 35-foot building. We didn't want to make that a barrier for solar.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I mean, part of me is also thinking about Ron Mitchell and talking about wanting to go to 40 feet just in general for his,
Yep.
downtown.
Oh yeah, he doesn't want to have all that parking underground. I know, but that's really what it's about. But I agree, but I think we're still clear that the maximum building height is 35, and that this is an accessory. The other line of logic Whitney used that was good, I thought, was it's like plumbing vents, HVAC vents, chimneys. I mean, those things do go higher than 35 feet potentially, or can, because as I read it, as I understand it, the 35 feet doesn't tie into something like that, which is part of the building.
Well, it does actually. It actually does. And do I have it in these slides? Give me a second here. Otherwise, I would have to look. I know where it is.
Okay. Well, to answer me that, and then the other side is that they're actually more of a permanent part of the structure than a solar array, which is really just bolted on and bolted and can be bolted off.
Yeah, it's this one, 1674. So,
Really?
that's protections out. There's another one which is actually, I don't think I have it on here because really, yeah, there's another thing, that's more about our next discussion, which is setbacks. There's another bit of code which is 16-60, and it talks about how things on a roof. So elements like elevator or other mechanical equipment that's on a roof, if that goes above height, it is considered a special review use. So they have to go before the planning commission, the board of trustees.
But
So
see,
it's
are you talking elevators or are you talking plumbing vents?
Not plumbing vents. I'm talking like any mechanical equipment on a roof is really what it is. That like any mechanical equipment on a roof.
So like like a package rooftop unit or something like that would be for commercial. Like if they had HVAC up there, not just a plumbing vent, but a unit. That if it was going above 35 feet, that would need to go through a special review use.
Yes. And the Muni code is being not fast. It's not opening fast, but that's what it is. It's if it would open for me, yeah, it's being weird. Let's try again here. Come on, not the municipal code. But okay, we'll go the long way. We're just not even working. Okay, fine. Sure why that's happening. We'll go this way. Let me find it here. Where am I looking for it at here? No way I'm not seeing it. Wait, there it is. Okay. Yeah, it's under 1660B. We're brought back to the same place and it's not opening right now. Super. Okay. Thanks for your patience, everyone. Yeah, and it specifies a whole spate of different equipment that would be on a roof, and it requires a special review use. So
1660.
1660B, it's the second one. The first one says 1660. It's like if a building is 8,000 or more, you want 4 more units, it's a special review use. And then it's the second part of that the subsection of that code, B, which says a whole bunch of different types of equipment on top of the roof, like mechanical equipment and stuff that goes above height, is allowed by review use. So thanks for taking your time this morning, municipal code. It is right there, and it's B. Closed. Okay. Other special review uses include any extension of a structure beyond the roof line. And then it gets into all of that stuff. Chimneys, tanks, church spires, belfries, fire and hose towers, observation towers, transmission towers. So all that kind of stuff, cooling, elevator shafts. So all that stuff, it's allowed to be on the roof if it's going above the roof line, but it has to be approved by special review use. I feel like that's maybe what Tungsten Village did, but maybe I have that wrong. But
How tall?
so there is a
How tall?
way to get there, but it's not a blanket approval process. It's going to the Planning Commission Board of Trustees to say, hey, can I have this equipment on my roof? And that's lengthening the process rather than removing barriers. So that would be my only concern, is it's not going to make it easier for them to do something. Unfortunately. So
Yeah,
don't.
I can't get that code to come up very quickly either.
Yeah, it's really not doing it this morning. So yeah, so it's not a fast way, but I do think, you know, if we can make the case that the 5-foot height exceedance, I mean, this is Soul Smart's recommendation. This is what you're seeing across a lot of municipalities who end up doing it. And then, you know, obviously there's going to be special cases in town. So, you know, it's hard to make regulations anyway, because there's always going to be special cases in this town that are not going to fit. But I think ensuring that buildings don't build to that height to the start, so that we're not starting from that place, but we're mostly dealing with existing buildings in the town, and the majority are not going to be over 35 or 40 feet. So I would hope this would not be something, you know, that our work wouldn't be taken advantage of. But I think that being a middle ground that allows working with people to get the solar they need, because I think the other key piece here is, despite some people's feelings about solar that are not the same as those of us who sit on the subcommittee, who may not want the equipment next to them, or, you know, as Billy and I have heard at the Planning Commission, those who may not support our recommendations. I think the need for energy and the need to fall in line with the Board of Trustees past resolution about encouraging alternate energy, and at a certain point the town, without just blanket approving it, you know, rubber stamping anything, needs to look toward the future and see that solar is a really viable opportunity for folks. And it's unfortunate because, you know, maybe if they got solar themselves, they would be supportive of it.
Yeah.
You know, Karen, got solar, and she was supportive of just taking all the regulations away. And so I feel like, you know, maybe if they had solar themselves, they would see the benefit of it, in a sense of like, hey, being able to capture your own individual power at a time when everything has gotten so much, so much more expensive. I think it does go into that sustainability component, which, you know, you and I will be dealing with on the animals piece too. So,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
kind of lean into that, because I think there's going to be support at the board. So even if the Planning Commission,
right, even and
Axel.
ultimately, we might even be able to sway the majority of the commission, you know, with that kind of logic. 'Cause really,
Yes.
ultimately,
That would
It's
be the
about the
hope.
majority, not, not.
That would be the hope. I mean, the only other way to do it is to do a survey of all buildings in the town and determine the heights. I don't know that the town has the monetary capacity to have something like, a surveyor going around and making sure, or, just looking at tall buildings and figuring out what that is, how many buildings are we actually dealing with? This would be an issue. That's probably the work of a GIS trained person who could do that stuff pretty quickly and figure out, mapping throughout the town. But I don't know that we have budget for something like that. So I think that we'll just have to arm wrestle them with our logic.
Okay, I mean, yeah, I guess I thought the code didn't account for things like plumbing vents and HVAC, but I mean, yeah, I guess it's, arguably solar is a system that you're putting up there, even though it's, being bolted on, it's not truly part of the home.
Yeah,
It is
I saw
because it gets
mixed.
wired into the home. So there's two sides of it,
Mm-hmm. And in different municipalities, I saw some, they allow going over heights. It's not a big deal, just kind of understood. And in others, they regulate it more.
Yeah, I did see some
Ned,
that didn't allow it to go over. I looked a little farther than just a few we've been looking at, and I found some that didn't allow it to go higher. So
yeah, I saw some do, some don't. And then, obviously, probably this conversation is a bigger deal in smaller districts. And maybe it won't be such a big deal in a big lot. Unless people are just kind of hawking the height, just to do it because they don't like their neighbor or what have you. But I think in general, I think what you guys decided previous, thanks for catching me up on that. I think that's fair. And then regarding the accessory heights, what are people feeling about that for a ground mount, given that the max height in 6 of the 8 districts is 20 feet? I think it's probably fair to, it's fair to say, because a lot of what I saw in terms of other municipalities when they were looking at height was maxing out between 15 and 20 feet. And that could allow accessory solar, in a sense, as a use by right with permitting. Which is what it would be anyway. It's not like I would go to the neighbors and say, are you cool with this solar array next to you? As long as they're meeting the requirements. But then this dovetails with where that the setbacks are and where people place it on their property. So something to consider as we think about max height for a ground mount. Because then when we get into the setbacks, and we're looking at these differing setbacks, we have all these front setbacks are what they are. So these are not the most flexible, because they're basically saying Ned wants to see front yards. So the intention is that with the principal structures, they're going to be set back certain, and that the accessory structures are the same in order to promote a front yard. And you see that differs when you get into side setbacks and then also rear setbacks. So when you're looking at some of these rear setbacks, that's a very large difference there in the rear. In some of these cases, some it's not that big of a deal, but from 40 to 10 feet, that's a significant difference for where the setbacks are, that someone can put it right closer to the neighbor's house than their own. And in Nederland, that may or may not go over well, but really, being as it's a case by case basis, I don't know that it's going to create a revolt. Just something to consider as we look at heights.
I think those accessory setbacks seem reasonable. The two main things that were the concerns I heard in the PC were wind drift, so it's 5 feet enough to take care of that. And then coming near intersections and visibility, I know that one is going to get especially critiqued. So like any kind of road intersection, obstructing visibility and then wind drift. I think those are the two main things that I heard as concerns about setbacks. Am I not right?
And I think you'd probably see it more in the high density with the 5-foot neighborhood commercial, CBD, in those smaller districts where the setback is so small. I think that's where you would, there could be more pushback for something that's a, accessory structure, 5 feet from the property line. Some of the challenge with Nederland is many people don't know their property lines. So they think, 5 feet from the street. And I explain these things to them like, well, you need a survey, an actual survey to understand where your property lines are. Because we want to avoid people building their ground mount into our right of way.
Oh, I know where it is.
In the incorporated boulder city. How about that? Is that better?
That's better.
Okay, well, now I can't hear you, but can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Nope, you can't hear me, can you?
Yes, we can. Can you just call in with your phone if you can hear us? You can't.
I'm going to send her an email.
Yeah, she had this problem last week, 2 weeks ago as well, and well, it's 4 weeks ago. And I think when she called in 2 weeks ago, it worked better.
Okay. I just sent her an email, so hopefully she can know that we are able to hear her. But I asked her if she would call in on her phone. Any other thoughts while we're waiting for Whitney to be able to connect back to us?
I guess the number one thing on my mind is the Sol Smart idea that we should try and let the accessory uses be the same for solar across the board. So when I look at these setbacks, they're sufficiently small for accessory. And I'm really wanting people to be able to put their solar up. So I guess what I'm wondering is, would it be possible to accept the existing accessory setbacks for solar and just say, yes, we're just going to accept them? Is that even feasible?
Sure, because that's what we're doing now. I mean, we've got, to my knowledge, one ground mount that I've seen in the town, which is up off the highway off of Navajo, Pomo.
On Pomo.
But
that thing doesn't come near the setbacks or the height. I think anyone who built a 20-foot high array, it just seems like that would be monumental.
Yeah. So, and I think the way to look at this is an accessory ground mount. From my understanding, ground mount's a lot more expensive than roof mount. So your average folks are probably going to do rooftop solar. And in most cases, probably the receptivity of that is going to be better for them. They're going to get better energy that way. Ground mount is a great opportunity of like, well, I can't catch it on my roof for these reasons, but I can stick this out here and be able to catch it right there at my property line where I have sun. And so I think given the cost of things, yes, there are people moving in with more money and some people may want a giant ground mount and we'll have to confront that. But I think the majority of the people in town would probably go with rooftop solar, and the costs have really come down a lot on that. But your ground mount is going to, in most cases, be a lot more expensive. And so it's, I mean, in all these years, I've seen one in the town. I haven't had any applications for them. So, and that one was built before I started working for the town in 2013. So it's not like we're getting, buffaloed on this issue. But as what you said, Larry, if we leave the accessory structures as is what they are and say, okay, that's what you have to follow for a ground mount, which is what we'd be doing anyway right now. If somebody came forward for a ground mount, I would limit them to that height and those setbacks. So we could just say, leave it as is, and that's how it is for solar. Solar would just follow the accessory setbacks that exist already. And, you know, but the only other thing I would say is, you know, if we start digging into that, say if we said, well, you can't go over 20 feet of height, then we're kind of getting a little tricky on staff to say, well, I have to meet the setbacks, but then have to meet this part. And so I don't want to kind of tear everything up together, if that makes any sense.
But why don't we go with those setbacks? Because quite honest, I could see even 5 feet probably being fine for the wind load, for the wind drift thing. And then likely being for intersections, because really could build a shed 5 feet from the corner. Keep it simple.
We'd love to hear from you, Whitney.
Trying.
I know you're trying.
So can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. Okay. While it's working, my general thoughts on setbacks and ground mounts are, if I'm understanding this chart right, you could build, the numbers on the right are where you could put a shed on your property. So I don't see why a solar array would be any different from a shed. It seems like that should just count as an accessory thing. It is an accessory thing. It's not a house. So I don't feel like that should be a hard sell. If you're worried about people putting anything, sheds or solar or whatever, someplace that isn't actually on their property by accident, then the rules should be the same for sheds and solar, because I guess anything with a permanent foundation, a tough shed, I guess, if you put it in the wrong spot, you could just move it. But if you're building something with a foundation and it's near the setback, what Boulder County does is, if you're within, like, I think it's like 10% of the setback, or something like that. Like if the setback is 10 feet and you want to be 11 feet or closer to the setback, if you want to be like right at the setback or, you know, 10% farther away than the setback, then you need a surveyor to tell you where that property line is. And they don't need to do a survey of the whole property. They just need to mark out that property line for you so that you know exactly where that 10 feet is. If you're going to be within 10 feet, if you're planning on being 100 feet from the property line, then like, who cares if you're actually only 90 feet from the property line? Nobody cares. So you don't need a surveyor to tell you that. But if it's going to be close, you need a surveyor.
I agree with that. Part of the challenge, and I'm not sure if you caught this, is that, you know, people presume where the street is, that like, there's the street, so then this must be my property line. And the issue throughout the town, through bad surveying over many years, and, you know, trees being planted in the right way and things growing in, and that there's a lot of encroachment on the town's property on the right of ways. As an example, all the buildings on the south side of First Street, East First Street, are all built into the right of way. So while they encroach, and we have agreements with folks about that encroachment so they don't encroach worse and just keep building further and further into the right of way, if those buildings burnt down, we wouldn't let them build back in, you know, on the town's property. We'd say build on your own property. And so, not to get too far afield there, but in general, I agree with you, because people are presumptive about their property lines, or they look at Boulder County property search and say, hey, those are my property lines. And I'm like, you can't argue a boundary line in court by pulling up property search and saying, see, it's a visual tool. It's a great visual tool. Lots of wonderful information. I use it every day, but it's not a survey. And so I think where there's a question of what are your property lines? Where am I counting from? Then I think it's fair to say, mark that boundary line out so that we understand where your property is. Because otherwise people could and would be building into the town's right of way. And when they start to get into infrastructure in the town's right of way, that's not so great for us.
Sure. And theoretically, the same would apply if they wanted to build a garage or something. It's
Correct,
not,
and it does. Yes. Yep, absolutely. You know, and this is something I try to explain to people where I'm like, how do I count the setback if I don't know where your property line is? I can't presume where the property line is based on where the road is, just given how much encroachment exists. So in some cases, I'm having to ask. But yeah, if it's in the middle of your property, I don't really care. If it's not going to affect, then I take an ILC, an improvement location certificate, because it's not a title search, and it's, on an ILC, which is what they use to sell property, it says not to be counted upon for fence, building, or future improvement lines. So if you're in the middle of your property and it's not going to affect your neighbors, what do I care? I don't. I'll just make sure that
right.
it,
And
meets.
the way Boulder County delineates that I do care versus I don't care is setback plus 10%. Like if you're within 10%, whatever the setback is, if you are planning to be within 10% of that, it might even be 20%, but I think it's 10%. That's where they draw the line specifically.
Yeah, that's actually
Which
really
is kind
smart.
of small, especially for the accessory dwellings. I feel like you could bump it up to 20 or 30% and have, because if you're, the difference between 10 feet and 13 feet from the property line, if you're totally wrong about where the property line is you could still be in the easement. So maybe 10% isn't the right number, but we need a number, because if you're within, this much of the setback, you need, and I would like to specify that you need a surveyor to mark the property line, but not that you need a surveyor to do a survey of the entire property. Those are two different things that cost two different amounts of money.
Yes, they do. Yes, they do. And there's a lot of pushback on that. Right now, the code says, for new build, for a new structure, it says ILC or survey. And I've been saying for 9 years, those are not the same documents. An ILC is not worth anything. A registered land survey costs a lot of money and it's monumented.
But
And
would
an
you,
ILC makes it good, but it's not meaningful.
so do you, I
Right.
mean, I'm just asking you this, Cynthia, in your job, do you expect to see an ILC or a survey for someone putting in solar? I guess I'm not sure. Is that what
Not
you're saying?
not rooftop.
Oh.
No, not
But
rooftop.
if they did a ground mount,
but for
you'd
ground
want to.
mount,
Oh, really?
if somebody was going to put something close to the property lines, let's use a garage for example. Then I would say, okay, do you have a survey within 5 years? And they'll say, well, I just bought this property, I have an ILC. And the ILC language says, right in the language, not to be counted upon for fence, building, or future improvement lines.
Yeah, but
Right there.
if people are putting
Because that surveyor is writing, they don't
Yeah.
want to get sued.
No, I understand
So
that because
there's,
that's what I've had done on my property. But and that's what it says. But my thought is, if someone's putting it in and they're just reading the code and they say, okay, I have to be this far away from the dot, and I'm good, given my thought of where my boundary is. Do they even come to you? Or do they just do it? They don't need to come to you, do they?
They still need permits
well, it
to
depends
do
on what
stuff.
it is.
Well, do they to do this?
It depends on what it is. So if you're
Yeah,
going to put in,
these are if you
you're
do a
gonna come
shed
to me,
that's
you have to get a-
non-permitted, then you don't need a permit.
some people do. A lot of people do. They actually ask.
Okay.
They ask what the rules are. Like, if they know they can put in a shed that's under a certain size, I'm just explaining that regulation to them, and then also pointing out, oh yeah, hey, there's some zoning components here. And it's a little tricky, right? Because if people are like, I could just build this thing, but a lot of people do call me just to check in and say, am I good to do this? Is this cool? Some people.
But my guess is all the
other
ones who
people
don't call you are the ones who don't call you. I mean, I don't know if we have a good sense of who does or doesn't, get permits. But the reality is a lot of people don't. And yeah, that's what I'm wondering. They may just read the code and say, oh, I'm good. I'm within this 10 feet, as I understand my boundary line to be. And it's going to
challenge
be,
for
and I'm going to
staff.
do it. Well, yeah, I mean, but is it any of your business? If it's a non-permitted thing, do they even need to reach out to you? If they think their array is going to go in and be small enough, short enough, and in the setbacks?
Well,
do
array
they
is
really
going to
need?
require a building permit. They have to
Oh,
get
Solar's never
array.
oh, they do for a ground.
Yes.
Okay.
So
I
they
didn't know that.
would be coming for me for
Okay.
something like that. For
Okay.
a shed, it's one of those real staff tricky things where, yeah, you could build this shed of this size, that's 1 story, and it's a storage thing, it's not to be lived in. And are you going to come to the town? And a lot of people do. I mean, over the years, people will ask like, hey, I can, what size can I build, and anything to that. And then I'm
Okay.
saying, do this without a permit, but there are setbacks. And so, yeah, there are people who are just going to go ahead and do what they do. And then there's a lot of others who come to ask. So some of it is a perception issue, and it's one of those tricky aspects for me, to be honest with you. Trying to navigate around a code on one aspect and then saying, but there are setbacks. So, yeah.
So to bring it back
It's
to
challenging.
solar, though, they have to get a permit. It makes sense, I guess, because of course an
For sure.
electrician needs to be involved and blah blah blah. So, yes, okay. So just to stay
Unless somebody was
focused.
wiring something themselves, like they, put up a couple panels or something and they didn't even come to me about it, every single solar permit's going to come through the town, rooftop or ground, and it's
Okay.
going to get reviewed. And so unless they're just really going off, on the outlaw end of like, whatever, I'm just going to put it here and then they can deal with it later, and I'll, ask forgiveness.
So you wouldn't accept an ILC, just to be clear, you would want a full survey or a surveyed boundary line at least.
Here's what I would say. There's a property over near the fire department that if they cough out their front door, it's technically the town's right of way. They have fenced it in.
Yep.
There's a fire pit in the yard, made it real pretty. I had to tell the lady, the house you bought a year or so ago, that's actually all, that entire yard that you fenced in for your dogs is actually the town's right of way technically. So you're encroaching. She ended up selling the house last year. They even made the yard even nicer looking. And the real estate agent was aware. But I can only do so much to rain on people's parades about stuff like this when a real estate agent is supposed to divulge that kind of information, and instead they just made the yard even nicer. So I'm sure the new owner probably thinks they own all that, and they don't technically. Is the town going to do anything about it? We have eminent domain. The town, you can encroach on the town and you can't take our property away. Neighbors who encroach on each other could claim adverse possession and actually take some land away from another neighbor if they build a shed on their neighbor's property and they don't do anything about it in Colorado in 18 years. The town has eminent domain. So that's why they've never had a very strong attitude about encroachment, because you cannot take the town's property away, even if you build into it. The town could say, unbuild it. They just haven't.
So I'm trying to stay,
is-
but what I'm saying, so I agree, I hear you, I agree, no problem. But if someone's doing an array, say a ground mount, are you going to require a survey from them, or a surveyed boundary, or an ILC? Like I'm just curious of your process. I don't want to change it or anything. I just want to understand what
Sure.
we're talking about here.
I think if there's a question, and I appreciate what Whitney's saying, if there's a question of property lines, because here's where the town stands. If there's an issue between neighbors, it's civil. So if neighbors are going to sue each other for adverse possession, it's civil. But to the best of my ability during permitting, I want to make sure that I am not creating issues that are going to create civil issues in the future. So that to the best of my ability of the town being able to say, okay, we believe that you're building on your property. You're not building on the town's right of way, or you're not building on your neighbor's property, and we haven't signed off on a permit to allow you to do that.
So what do you require people to do?
So what I would say is, in a situation, and exactly what Whitney said, of show me the boundary line there. Have a surveyor show the boundary line. And if an ILC is not going to do it, I mean, in a situation like, in a shed or garage situation, if they're asking me, okay, well then I want you to show me this boundary line on a survey. And if an ILC is not doing it, and there's a question of property lines and other things, and in many cases there are between neighbors, then I would lean toward, not a full survey, because that could be 2,000 to 4,000, but showing that boundary line there. So we understand, where are we counting from? Otherwise, how can I count 5 feet?
Okay, so that's what people have to do anyways. Okay.
Especially in those
Go
small
ahead.
districts, like that could be, there could be a house on one side, a shed 5 feet from another garage 5 feet away. And on a wildfire perspective, that's ladder fuel. That's not great. But that's a whole nother story. It's a whole nother subcommittee.
Both an ILC and a survey are a piece of paper. which is not actually that helpful. My recommendation for what is both inexpensive and actually practical is that you want a surveyor to come and physically mark the property line so that you know where you're measuring from, because having it written down on a piece of paper isn't actually that helpful. Like a picture of the property line, you need to know where it actually is so you can use a measuring tape.
Right, but
Physically.
when a surveyor does that, when they lay down survey points, they are doing that. That's what the surveyor's doing. What an ILC often does is they're looking at, you know, they don't do research. They're not doing title research. They're just looking at, okay, there's a survey next door, so I understand this boundary line to be here. And then when you see the survey speak where it's like 90 feet thence, 60 feet from this direction thence, they're just following that kind of stuff. So if there were bad surveys in the past, then things are going to be off. So it really, you know, it's challenging. It's a big challenge up in the mountains, across the mountains. Bad surveys have been, and ILCs and people believing that's what their property line is. So it has been challenging. But nonetheless, I'm not opposed to the setbacks as they are.
So
Go ahead, Whitney.
If you ask the surveyor to come and physically mark the property line, would they be relying on crappy old surveys, or would they be using good data?
It depends on the surveyor, because I've seen, you know, not great work from them. But I can't, the constitutes favoritism working for a government, so I can't say go with this person, don't go with that person. But if they're physically marking it out, you know, you have 10 years to survey. So if you actually do a survey of your property and you think that things are off, you have 10 years. Otherwise, that runs as what the survey is. Whether it's wrong. That's why we have the problems that we see, unfortunately. Nonetheless, I think, you know, in many cases, this may not be an issue. And the accessory ground mount, you know, maybe there'll be a groundswell for it and everyone will want it. I think we live in a really sunny area for most of the year, and most people are going to want to capture it on their roof, and that's going to be financially feasible for most folks. And then there may be people who want to have rooftop solar and an array, and however that may go over. I want to encourage solar. I don't want to make it harder for folks. So I don't want to make obstacles for folks to be able to achieve these things. I just think there are some incipient challenges on that. And how can you count setbacks if you don't know where your property line is? What am I counting from? Make believe? So that's the general challenge for the town to deal with. But I think in general, this is what I would say if someone said, hey, I want to put up accessory, I want to have an accessory ground mount, then I would be looking at these specific figures in the right column of, okay, well, you know, if it's in the front, then these are the setbacks you're going to have to follow. If it's on the side, these are the setbacks you're going to follow. If it's in the rear, these are the setbacks you're going to follow. And that's how it exists right now. So I don't have an issue with them existing as it exists right now.
Great, me neither.
Okay. Billy? Erica?
No, it sounds great. I mostly needed to be set straight on what people have to do already. Thanks.
It's challenging. Okay. So yes, and then these were the things that that we were looking at, you know, with respect to vision clearance and things like that. And so just to tag on to Billy's comment to round it out, when someone is proposing something and I'm looking at, so they submit a solar permit, I'm looking at the details, looking at where they're going to place it. And obviously in most cases, what I'm seeing in 99.9% of the cases, I'm seeing rooftop solar may or may not be an issue, you know. And when you look at the array piece of a ground mount, Vision clearance, I would consider it just like I would consider a sign or anything that would be within the vision clearance area. So I would consider it doing permitting and think, where is this located? Is that going to create an issue? You know, and I think where you get into districts that are smaller, medium density, and these ones, as you're cruising down, these are generally, you know, these are smaller than, significantly smaller than these top two. That's where the vision clearance issue may be a challenge, especially if there's a question of where the right of way is. Because if people are trying to start, you know, counting 5 feet and they're considering the right of way, then that would create vision clearance. So there are kind of those dovetailing issues to make sure that we know where the property line is, and then trying to consider how to cite things so that it's not going to create an issue. But as it stands, you know, somebody could put something as close to the rear setback as these, and they could do the same for the side setbacks, and legally they could do that. Whether or not it's a good idea or it creates a vision clearance issue, they, you know, they, from zoning perspective, they have that ability to do. And hopefully it wouldn't be an issue. The central business district, the 0 or 10, it's an old CBD relic of when buildings were built right next to each other. So they, in those central business districts, you'll see that like in Golden and other places, or, you know, Fort Collins, where they're just building right next to each other and there's no setback in between them. But other than, if that's not the case, then it would be 10 feet on the sides. So yeah, there are some code iniquities that are going to have to be dealt with, and that we're not going to be able to solve in our subcommittee. And I think that's a part of it. But I think that that kind of gets us to the next week here, or for our next meeting. And this may or may not be relevant. That's projections from buildings. There are allowed architectural type projections up to 3 feet into required yards or open space. That is allowed by right. It's not like it makes people very happy if if you want, you know, if you're close to the setback and then you want to go closer to, say, their house. I've seen that exist. But we could consider adding solar into something like that, or just leaving it as it is and saying solar can follow the setbacks, follow the accessory setbacks, and that's fine. But as an allowed aspect, things are, you know, these particular things are allowed to project. Whether or not solar would be seen as exacerbatory to anyone, it's hard for me to say.
Is that, I don't have my computer in front of me at the moment. Is that listed somewhere what the accepted projections are?
Yes, it's 16-74 is the code for the slow moving municipal code this morning. Cornices, eaves, canopies, sunshades, gutters, chimneys, flues, belt courses, leaders, sills, pilasters, lintels, ornamental features, and other similar architectural features may not project more than 3 feet into a required yard or open space as established by coverage.
Okay.
And when it says as coverage standards, that's talking about impervious surface. So that's saying, you know, you have to be below your impervious surface piece, which in most cases, in most places, people are going to be under, except overbuilt properties in some of Old Town. But the code is 16-74. So I think that we can pick up from there next time, and then we're looking at 1678 performance standards. Glare is one of the emission types. We had talked about this in the past. So
glare solar panels is not.
I'm sorry?
The glare from solar panels is not a real thing. Like, they're less shiny than windows. the whole point of solar panels is to absorb as much light as physically possible without
That's
reflecting.
that's what I thought. I was trying to say that to Roger, but he wouldn't hear it. But yeah, that makes sense to me.
We argued this, Billy and I argued this, and we had a member of the planning commission, one member who used to be the planning commission chair for many, many years, who argued that, you know, when light hits Big Springs, that he sees glare from panels. It seems like it would be pretty transitory, the glare that you would see. And again,
Indeed.
he is
Windows.
Did you say it can be?
I said, if there is any glare, it is, as you say, minor and transitory. It's certainly less, they're certainly less reflective than windows. And windows are definitely allowed in houses. Lots of them.
They are.
I agree, and I
Lots
think
of 'em.
Billy.
I agree.
Any other
100%,
thoughts from anyone else? I think we lost Larry, but anyone? Any other thoughts?
And I'll use that specific logic because when we get pushed back on this again about glare, I'll bring up the fact that they don't glare. They don't reflect as much as. Oh, go ahead.
If it helps, like, they are specifically designed to absorb as much light as possible. That's the point. There's much effort made of solar panels to not glare as much as possible. They all have anti-glare coatings on them.
Oh, cool.
Which is a
Very
fun word.
helpful, Whitney.
Yeah, that's really helpful. I mean, it's going to be hard to argue against that fact. So yeah, good. That's helpful.
And yes, I guess
Yeah,
sure
that's
they
very,
are
very
flat,
helpful.
like say the reservoir or windows, but every effort is made to have them not glare.
Okay. So that kind of covers most of what is in zoning. And so I think at this point, it's really compiling all of our recommendations, and we can talk about if we need to meet again, how we feel, or if we feel like I can send out the recommendations. It's a not reply all thing, just so we don't look like we're having a meeting when we're not noticing. But if anything I get wrong from compiling the information as we've cruised through this process, then people can let me know. Just send me an email and, comment to me personally, and I'll make sure I say that. And then I think we could probably move this forward to the planning commission. What does everyone think?
Sounds good to me.
The only thing I have going on is I will not be available. I will be on a canoe trip in Maine on the next planning commission meeting, and therefore no one is really there to. Well, you, Cynthia, would be the only one there, and maybe Karen. I'm not sure if she'll be able to participate since it goes on to the BOT afterwards, but I won't be at the July meeting. So
Okay.
just go with that, information one way or the other, whether it matters or not.
Okay.
Oh,
Erica?
would you prefer that we move it to August then?
Well, there's a flip side to that too. Like I am running for a different office, and that election is August 23rd, and I'm trying to think the next August 24th would be the next PC meeting. So I don't know how that would play out either. So I don't know. Maybe I just have to be out of the picture. I don't know. Cynthia, it leaves you and, Karen, if she's able to speak to it, you need to bring her up to speed. I think she'd be happy with everything that's being proposed. I just don't know if she'll be allowed to weigh in or she'll have to bow out because it goes to them next.
It's an interesting legal question, but I think for something that's policy, which is what this is, we're talking about policy, not a quasi judicial. We're not making a decision for you on your property. So it's a bit different when we're looking at a broader policy. So I know I feel like she would be able to speak. But one other thing that we could do, Billy, is you could write a letter to the planning commission and just kind of note like, hey, I'm, been working on this, excited to bring it forward to you guys. Unfortunately, I'm away. And then as some of you know, I'm running for mayor. Make sure you vote. And, you know, might be, I mean,
Yeah,
you wouldn't be named by August, right? If they had the election,
no, that's probably true. Yeah, I would
it's
still be.
seated by the Board of Trustees by the very next night. So it may be safe to say it could go to August and you could be there.
Okay.
But the other way to do it is if we take it to July, just saying, okay, here's what it is. Because we're also coming up on, well, we didn't have our June meeting.
I know.
So yeah, then the next one would be July. It's been a strange time, but yeah, you could write a letter and say, I feel strongly about these things and here's why.
That works
And
for me. I mean, I don't want to
since
hold
these are
it
the
up.
case-
I don't want to hold it up. So I mean, I will do that, and then that coupled with you being there, and if Karen can be, actively
Uh-huh.
participating, then she also, will we can bring her up to speed. She'll have read my letter. That worked for me. I don't really want to hold it up, because it seems like we're kind of where we need to be, and it is June 22nd. So
Yeah,
I mean,
and
it's kind of silly to wait.
I think the other thing here is that as much weight as the planning commission has, and it does, and they're making their recommendations and trying to consider from a zoning perspective, and we may get pushback from the planning commission, and you and I anticipate that. But I think the other side of it is that the BOT is going, they're looking at supporting.
Yeah, they're gonna make it happen. Yeah.
They can say, that's all very nice and good, planning commission, thanks for your recommendations, and we're going to go with this. And so, and there'll be weigh-in at the planning commission from the public. There'll be weigh-in from, the Board of Trustees and the public. So if there's stark outcry in the public about what our group has decided and our suggestions, then we'll certainly hear that. But again, we're making suggestions.
What about
We're not making
what about the BZA?
law.
That happens earlier in July, right?
The BZA, the next one would be July 14th, and we do
Cool.
have a very, so we can talk about it there.
Well, good, because it would be good to see how that goes. I mean, I actually expect that to go easier anyways, but like, if that goes through fairly smoothly, then it's already got momentum. And yeah, I mean, and then if I write a letter, Karen's there, you're there, then then we may just be then we may just be doing fine to move it right through the PC on July 27th. And and then there's public input at both of those meetings, BZA and PC. And that would need to be, whatever happens to the BZA, probably, we should at least bring up at the PC meeting. And you're right, ultimately the BOT is going to do what they're going to do. And
I think the only thing that's going to affect the BZA is this potential height thing.
Yeah. But that's all right. That's a big one.
I think if we're looking at it from a perspective of the majority of people are going to do rooftop solar and it shouldn't be a problem. Most people have slope.
Right.
And then who don't, if they're under 35 feet, then it, shouldn't be a problem. And there's ones to go a little bit above to support solar if there isn't. And then it'll be the board's determination, the Board of Trustees to decide, they can hear what the Board of Zoning Adjustment thinks about that and the planning, but it'll be theirs to decide if they like that. I think what stands strongly in that favor is that there's a lot of towns that are looking to support solar, and that the whole intent of this is to support solar in line with the Board of Trustees previously passed goals. And so we're just trying to work with that while also understanding that, just a blanket approval to go as high as you want is not what we're looking at. In many cases, I don't think that the suggestions that we made are so dramatically large that they're going to change the town and magnify things in any big way, except to try to see more solar in a town.
Cool. And then I think we should just start, pull the, make the PowerPoint to go in front of the BZA unless someone else has more that we need to talk about. I guess we could still talk in a couple weeks. We should be,
Okay.
if we need to, that still happens before the BZA meeting. So.
Okay.
So
So
July
you
6th.
compile into a PowerPoint.
So you think?
Here in the next week or so, and then send out to our group. If there's anything I'm missing, please let me know. Just reach out to me and let me know if I overlooked something or put it incorrectly, so we can have it be the voice of our group, and then bring it to the BZA first, and then the PC in July, and then can make their recommendations that will go to the Board of Trustees, and the Board of Trustees can make, determine what they want. And I think that's fair to say. How do you feel about the
Cynthia, I was going to ask real quick, are these meetings public, and
Mhm.
does it make sense if I come and join you as well as a sustainable?
Yes, please.
Awesome.
Okay.
Yes,
Yes,
they are
please.
public.
Would love it.
And that would be great.
Would love it. I would love any one of you to join us. They
Yes,
are public.
actually, as many of you as
You are
possible.
welcome to attend. Billy doesn't have to solve the world. We could certainly
Good thing, because I never will.
support your logic, the benefit that you put into this group. Absolutely. You're absolutely welcome to come, and we would love that.
Cynthia, could you invite all of us to these meetings?
Yes.
If that's easy for you to do, and then we could put them on our
Sure.
calendar now.
Yes. What I'll do, I probably already have the invitations because Miranda lines everything out for the year. So I could just forward the invitation, anything that I already have. And I can just, or just send you the information and send you an invite if you guys are interested in attending. So what you're looking at is, I believe, let me grab my calendar here. July 14th is the Board of Zoning Adjustment. They're the ones who hear variances to people who cannot meet dimensional standards like setbacks and that kind of stuff. And the PC meeting would be on the 27th. These meetings start at 7 p.m. They are hybrid. You can attend in person or you can attend online.
And they're public.
And they are public. And there is a opportunity with any topic we talk about to add your public comment.
And ask, feel free to ask other people to comment, turn in comments or attend.
And if you know anyone who supports solar and wants to join the crowd of folks who think that the recommendations are positive because we're trying to support solar, we're also thinking about planning, they're welcome to come as well. So we're happy to see them at any of those meetings.
Yes.
And we have new members because we've had so much change and all that kind of stuff. So we have a new member to the Board of Zoning Adjustment. Billy just got reappointed as a member to the Board of Zoning Adjustment, and he's also on the Planning Commission. And if he goes up to the Board of Trustees, he'd be leaving both of those boards and then being at the board level where they make the big decisions. So
And there are two new planning commissioners too, since there are two new planning commissioners already.
Yep.
Mike and
Two.
Chris.
Yep. Mike, I know. Chris, I don't think I've met yet.
Yeah, they would both be positive about solar for sure. Guaranteed.
Awesome. Yeah, so hopefully we will see some positive movement on this. And July 14th and July 27th, I'll make a PowerPoint in preparation of those meetings, send you guys invites, and just compile everything we've got so that we can present it and get any feedback they may have. And hopefully it'll be positive, but if not, well, at least we've put a lot of effort into this. So thanks everyone for your time and your energy and for wanting to see solar and wanting to see that, wanting to see barriers reduced so that we can keep moving on this and keep improving.
Yeah, thank you, Cynthia, for leading
Thanks,
us.
Cynthia. Yes. Shepherding.
I'm trying. So yeah, and then, you know, if I get anything wrong, please kick me, I'll jump faster. Just let me know and I'll make any shifts to it so that we have the best presentation that we can and that they, you know, the board understands. I think it's an incredibly receptive board. I was at the board meeting for another subcommittee and presenting our recommendations for that. And they are very engaged board, very, very engaged. Small right now, but they're very engaged. And I think that they will be supportive because I think many of them understand the place that we're existing in society right now with climate change and energy costs and everything else. So I think recommendations will be welcomed, is my thought. So, all right. Thanks, everyone. Appreciate your time. And if you need to reach out about anything, feel free to reach out to me. Otherwise, you'll see that PowerPoint coming out at you here in the next week or so. And then let me know any thoughts you want to share with.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Billy. Thanks,
Guys,
Melody. Thanks, Erica.
Thanks, everybody. You guys have a good day.
You too.
Thanks,
Bye.
you too, Billy.
Bye.
Thanks, Macy.
Bye, everyone. You bet.
Bye. Macy, did I get you out in time for any other meetings you have that follow this? I hope.
Hi, Cynthia. Sorry, I just faintly heard my name, I think. Did I?
Are you from home or are you at work?
I'm at home today, working
Oh,
on
good for you.
2 sets of minutes, one from last night and one from last week. And then getting ready, we have our TRC meeting here and
Can we
just,
stop the recording?
oh, yeah, let's do that.